It was 3 in the morning when the banging started. Not knocking, banging. The kind that rattles the frame and makes your body move before your brain catches up. I'd been asleep for maybe 2 hours, still half-dressed from the closing paperwork I'd been reviewing the night before. My feet hit the floor before I even registered the sound, muscle memory, doing what years of night shifts at the hospital had trained into me. I stood in the dark hallway, hand flat against the wall, listening. Then I heard her voice, "Open this door, Sloane. This is family property, and you know it." My mother. I hadn't seen her in 6 weeks, not since the day I signed the final deed. She'd sent 3 texts after that, all variations of the same message, "We need to talk about the house." And I'd answered none of them. I thought silence was enough of an answer. I was wrong. I looked through the peephole. She was standing in the hallway in her church coat, the one she only wore when she wanted to look respectable. My brother Derek was behind her, arms crossed, jaw set, and at the far end of the hall, barely visible in the overhead light, stood my father, holding a paper bag like we were all about to sit down for breakfast. I counted to 5. Then I unlocked the door. The first thing my mother did was try to push it open wider. I didn't let her. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "We're here to talk sense into you," she said. "Before you do something you can't take back." "I already did it," I said, 30 days ago. The bank confirmed it. Derek shifted his weight. "You know that's not what she means." I looked at him. He'd driven 4 hours from Columbus for this. That told me everything about how planned this was. "You could have called," I said. My mother's chin lifted. "You don't answer calls." She wasn't wrong, but she also hadn't tried once since the closing. The last time she'd actually spoken to me, not texted, not sent a message through Derek, but actually called, was the day I told her I was buying the house myself. That conversation had ended with her telling me I was selfish, that I only thought about myself, that after everything she'd done for me, I couldn't do this one thing for the family. The one thing she wanted was for me to put Derek's name on the deed. I'm 31 years old, I'm a registered nurse with 11 years of overnight shifts and 3 travel contracts behind me. I'd been saving since I was 22. The house I bought, a 3-bedroom in Ashburn, Virginia, 20 minutes from the hospital where I worked, was bought entirely with money I'd earned and saved, using a first-time home buyer program I'd researched for 2 years. My name, my credit, my down payment, my signature on every page. Derek was 35 and had lived at home for the past 4 of those years. He wasn't bad, exactly. He just had a pattern: start something, need help, expect someone to catch him. And the someone was always me or my mother, and lately more me than her. "I'm not doing this at 3 in the morning, I said. "Then when?" my mother said. "You've been avoiding us for a month. I've been unpacking, Sloane." Her voice dropped, the tone she used when she wanted me to feel like a child again. "Your brother needs stability. You know what he's been going through. His business didn't work out, and he needs somewhere to get back on his feet. You have a 3-bedroom house, you're one person. I know how many bedrooms I have. Then you know there's room." I looked at her for a long moment. The hallway felt narrow, the overhead light was too yellow. My father still hadn't said anything. "There's no room," I said. "Not for this." I closed the door. I heard her say my name twice more through the wood, then Derek's voice, low and short, then silence. I sat down on the floor of my own living room and didn't move for a while. The thing nobody tells you about buying a house alone at 31 is that your family doesn't see it as independence, they see it as inventory. I'd been the responsible one for as long as I could remember. The one who showed up, who handled things, who stayed late at the family dinners to help clean up while everyone else left. My mother called it being dependable. I called it being invisible in the right way. When I got my first travel nursing contract at 25 and told my mother I was going to Seattle for 13 weeks, she cried. Not because she'd miss me, because she'd been counting on me to cover Derek's car insurance while he figured things out. I covered it anyway and got on the plane. When I came back, nothing had changed. Derek was still figuring things out. My mother was still organizing his life for him. My father was still doing whatever my mother asked, in the quiet way he'd done everything for 37 years of marriage. I started saving harder after that, not for any specific reason, just the way you save when you know eventually you'll need to build a wall between yourself and something. 2 years ago, I found the house. It wasn't perfect. The kitchen was dated. The backyard was mostly weeds, but it was mine in every way that mattered. The listing sat in my saved folder for 6 months while I ran the numbers over and over. Then I made an offer. I didn't tell my family until after the inspection. My mother's reaction wasn't surprise. It was calculation. Within 48 hours, she'd already floated the idea that Derek could help with the mortgage in exchange for living there. When I pointed out that I didn't need help with the mortgage, she reframed it as Derek needing a fresh start in a positive environment. He can get his fresh start somewhere that isn't my house, I said. That was when the text started. 3 weeks before closing, my mother told me she'd already spoken to a family friend who was a real estate attorney who'd explained that in Virginia, if a family member contributed to the property in any way, they could have a claim. She said this casually, like it was just information, like she wasn't threatening me. I didn't answer that text either. But I called my own attorney the next morning. I didn't sleep again after they left that night. By 6, I was up making coffee, going through the same mental checklist I'd been running for weeks. Deed recorded, title insurance in place, no co-signers, no family contributions of any kind. I'd been meticulous about that, paid every closing cost myself, had documentation for every dollar. My phone buzzed at 8. Derek, Mom is really hurt. You could have at least talked to us. I put the phone face down. At 9, my mother again. I raised you better than this. Your father and I gave you everything and you can't do one thing for your brother. I'd heard versions of that sentence my whole life. It used to land, it used to make me apologize for things that weren't my fault, give things I couldn't afford to give, make myself smaller to make everyone else more comfortable. It didn't land the same way anymore. I texted back, I'm not doing this by text. If you want to talk, it needs to be calm and in person. She didn't respond for 2 hours. Then, fine, Sunday dinner, like a normal family. I almost didn't go. I went because I wanted to believe it could be a real conversation, not a negotiation. It was a negotiation. My mother had made pot roast, the good kind, with carrots and the small onions she peeled by hand. The table was set properly, cloth napkins, the plates she only brought out when she wanted something to feel official. Derek was already there when I arrived. He looked tired. He'd been staying at a friend's place since his apartment lease ended, and it showed, the kind of tired that lives in the face when you don't have a place that's really yours. I felt something soften briefly and then I made myself stop. My father came in from the garage, shook my hand the way he'd done, since I was 16, the adult handshake he'd started giving me the year I got my first job. It was his way of showing respect and also, I think, his way of keeping everything surface level so nobody had to feel anything too directly. We ate mostly in silence for the first 10 minutes. Then my mother set her fork down. I've been thinking, she said, about a different arrangement. I kept eating. Derek could pay you rent. Real rent, not just a gesture, whatever the market rate is for a room in Ashburn. The market rate for a room in Ashburn is anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500 a month, I said. He can find that? Not with his credit, my mother said, as if this were my problem. Then he needs to work on his credit. Sloane. Her voice went careful. He's your brother. I know who he is. Derek looked at the table. To his credit, he didn't push. He'd always been better in person than over text, and I could see he was uncomfortable with this, even if he'd driven here and shown up at my door at 3 in the morning. I didn't ask for this, he said quietly. I know, I said. She told me you'd said it was okay. I set my fork down. She what? He looked up, something shifted in his face. About 6 weeks ago, before you closed, she said you'd talked and you were considering it. I turned to my mother. You told him I was considering it. She didn't blink. I told him the conversation was ongoing. There was no conversation. You texted me and I didn't answer. Silence is agreement in this family. I almost laughed. I felt it rise up and pressed it down. Silence has never been agreement. Silence is me not wanting to fight. You're fighting now, she said, because you told my brother I'd agreed to something I never agreed to. The table went quiet. My father studied his pot roast. Derek looked between us with the expression he'd worn at every conflict our whole lives, the expression of someone who'd learned early that the best position was nowhere. He counted on it, my mother said finally. He made plans, then those were his plans, not mine. She leaned forward. After everything I've done for you, every sacrifice, you can't do this for your brother. I looked at her. I'd heard this before. I'd spent years trying to calculate the debt, trying to figure out if it was real, if I owed what she said I owed, if love was supposed to work like a ledger. I paid for my own college, I said. I covered my own grad school. I paid Derek's car insurance for 2 years. I paid the electric bill here 3 separate times when things were tight. I have every Venmo record, every bank transfer. I'm not saying that to be cruel. I'm saying it because I've been paying the debt my whole life and it never gets smaller. My mother's face went pale. I'm not putting Derek's name on my house, I said. And I'm not letting him move in. It's not about him. It's about me building something that's mine and keeping it. The silence that followed was the thick kind, the kind that means something has shifted. My father cleared his throat. You've gotten hard, he said. I've gotten clear, I said. I left before dessert. The next week was the worst one. My mother called 11 times across 3 days. I answered twice. Both times ended her voice cycling through guilt, and then anger, and then grief, and then back to guilt, like a washing machine that couldn't finish its cycle. I stopped picking up after the second time. Then came the social media. My aunt on my mother's side posted something vague about children who forget where they came from and blood being thicker. 2 cousins liked it. A woman from my mother's church group commented with a prayer hands emoji. My mother hadn't posted anything directly, but she'd told enough people, enough of her version of the story that it was circulating without her needing to. I knew how this worked. I'd watched her do it with other family disagreements over the years. She was good at it, the way some people are good at things they've never had to acknowledge they're doing. I got a text from my cousin in Maryland. I heard what's happening. I just want you to know I think you should try to see her side. I didn't respond. I went to work. I did my shifts. I came home and I fixed the fence post in the backyard that had been leaning since I moved in. I repainted the hallway. I bought a kitchen faucet and installed it myself, badly the first time, and then correctly the second time after watching 3 videos. I was learning to be a person who lived in her own house, and it felt like learning a new language. On the 5th day, my friend Vic called me. Vic had been my closest friend since our second travel contract together, a winter in Bozeman, Montana, where we'd both been miserable and cold and had bonded entirely out of survival necessity. She was direct in the way that only see someone who's had no patience for nonsense since childhood is direct. I heard a rumor, she said. Which one? The one where your mum told your brother you agreed to let him move in and then filed some kind of complaint with a housing authority. I sat down. She did what? Someone who told your cousin that your mum consulted with that attorney friend of hers and filed some kind of inquiry about a family member's right to occupy. I was silent for long enough that Vic said Sloane to check if I was still there. I need to make some calls, I said. I called my attorney the next morning. Her name was Harper, and she'd handled my closing, and she picked up on the second ring with the calm of someone who'd heard this kind of thing before. She had. Your mother contacted the county housing authority, claiming she had documentation that she made a financial contribution to the purchase, Harper said. It was flagged because there's no co-signer on record and the title is clean. She didn't contribute anything, I said. I have bank records. I know, that's why it was flagged and not processed, but she submitted statements saying she gave you $10,000 toward the down payment. The number hit me hard. $10,000, a number specific enough to sound real, a number I'd never received. She forged a statement. She signed a statement. Whether the underlying facts are true is a separate question. The authority asked for corresponding bank records. None were provided. Because they don't exist, then we respond with yours. This isn't a legal action yet, Sloane. It's an inquiry, but if she presses it, it could become one. I want you to pull every bank statement from the past 3 years, every transfer, every record of your down payment funds. I already had them. I'd been organized about this from the beginning, the same way I was organized about medication logs and patient charts. Every dollar I'd saved was documented. My down payment had come from a high-yield savings account I'd been building since 24. Every deposit was my paycheck, every transfer traceable. That afternoon I sat at my kitchen table and assembled the folder. Bank statements, pay stubs, closing disclosure, the wire transfer confirmation. 3 years of savings distilled into a stack of paper. I labelled it exactly like I'd have labelled a patient file. Date, case number, category. Then I drove it to Harper's office. While Harper processed everything, the calls from home continued. Derek texted me once more, and that message was different from the others. I found out what she did. I didn't know she was going to do that. I'm sorry. I stared at that for a long time. I believed him. That was the hard part. Derek wasn't the architect of this. He was someone who'd let himself be carried too long by people who said they were helping and were actually just keeping him close. I knew that pattern. I'd been adjacent to it my whole life. I wrote back, I believe you. This isn't about you. He didn't respond right away. Then, she's saying you owe her, that you've always taken and never given back. She's been telling that to everyone. I thought about the car insurance, the electric bills, the graduation gift my mother had told everyone was from her that I'd actually paid for because she asked me to cover it and said she'd pay me back. The night I drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because my father had a health scare and she didn't want to be at the hospital alone, and then she'd told the story to every person she knew as if she'd handled it herself. I thought about all of it and I decided I wasn't going to explain any of it to anyone who wasn't asking in good faith. You don't have to fight this battle for me, I told Derek over the phone later. But I need you to understand, I'm not backing down on the house. I know, he said. I don't want you to. It was the most honest thing he'd said to me in years. 2 weeks after the inquiry was filed, Harper called with the resolution. The Housing Authority reviewed your documentation, she said. The inquiry has been dismissed. Your title is clear and the record reflects no valid claim by any third party. I was in the hospital parking lot between shifts when I got the call. I sat in my car for a few minutes after hanging up, watching other nurses walk in and out, watching the ordinary machinery of the day. I didn't feel triumph. I felt tired in a way that had nothing to do with the night shift. That evening, I called my mother. She didn't pick up. I left a voicemail that was shorter than I expected it to be. The inquiry was dismissed, I said. My records were clean. I hope we can figure out how to talk about this eventually, but I need some time. She called back the next morning. The first minute was silence, the kind she used to recalibrate when a conversation wasn't going the way she'd planned. Then she said, I did what I had to do for my family. I am your family, I said. More silence. You've always been the strongest one, she said finally. I just thought that meant you could carry more. Strength doesn't mean I have no limits, I said. It means I know where mine are. She didn't respond to that. We stayed on the line for another minute without speaking, and then she said she had to go, and I said okay, and that was the end of it for now. The ficus I'd bought the week I moved in was doing better. I'd put it in the corner by the south window, and it had started pushing out new leaves, which meant I was doing something right. I stood in my living room on a Sunday morning, coffee in hand, looking at the space I'd built. The couch I'd picked out myself, the bookshelf I'd assembled badly and then fixed. The kitchen where the new faucet finally didn't drip. Vic came over that afternoon and we ate takeout on the back porch while the October light went gold across the weeds I still hadn't fully cleared from the yard. You doing okay? She asked. Getting there. She's not going to stop being who she is, Vic said. It wasn't a warning, just a fact offered by someone who knew my mother from a decade of listening to me figure out how to navigate her. I know, I said, but I can stop being who I was around her. Vic looked at me over her container of pad thai. What does that mean, practically? It means I answer when I want to, I visit when I want to. I help when I have something to give and not when I don't, and I stop performing guilt for things that aren't my fault. That sounds like a reasonable person. It sounds terrifying, I said. She laughed. Later that evening, after she left, I locked up the house and turned off the lights and walked room to room the way I'd started doing every night, not checking for anything in particular, just inhabiting the space. This room, that hallway, the bedroom where I slept without an alarm on nights I didn't work. The folder with the bank records and the Harper documents was in the filing cabinet in the second bedroom, the one I hadn't decided what to do with yet. It wasn't a trophy, it wasn't a wound either. It was just documentation of something I'd had to prove, which I had. I went to bed at 10 and slept without interruption for the first time in longer than I could remember. In the morning there was frost on the back porch steps and new light through the east window, and nothing waiting for me that I hadn't chosen to put there. I poured coffee and stood in my kitchen, in my house, and let the quiet be exactly what it was. Mine.